Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about, this is going to be part 2 of how my irresponsibility in past years affected my son and maybe had something to do with the estrangement. I don't know. It could have. I guess I'll never know for sure. How are you all doing today? I hope you're all doing well and coping. I've got my Halloween fall themed pillows. They make me happy. Okay, so I know I told you about my drinking, which did happen later in life, and my son was basically out of the house, but did it affect him? Yes. So I wanted to talk about that first, how my drinking affected him. I was living with his dad and my son was living on his own, and I was drinking a lot. And the weekends, I just drank more. I went to work every day, Monday through Friday, but when I came home, boy, I started banging them back. And it was a progression. You know, anybody that knows an alcoholic knows it's a disease of progression. Sometimes slowly, sometimes fast. And, you know, I was gaining some ground there for sure. And this was a Sunday afternoon. And his father, you know, a lot of times would take it in stride, but sometimes not. And he had some choice words for me on this particular Sunday. So, you know, I did some errands early on a Sunday, and then I went right to the package store. In New England, we call liquor stores package stores. So if you want to know what kind of store it was a liquor store. And, you know, in those days, and I think even to today, there's certain stores that don't have alcohol. Now, I live in Florida, and boy, every store has alcohol. You can go in a Target or a Walmart, there's alcohol. But up north, it wasn't like that. So I digress. Not that that's important, but I thought it was kind of interesting. So anyway, so after I did my errands that Sunday, I went right to the package store, which was normal for me. Thank Lord, not anymore, but it was normal. Went to the package store. Sometimes I get some, you know, some drinks for my ex. I was nice, you know, we could sit, watch movies is what we usually did on a Sunday afternoon. My ex was a very good cook, and he would cook a big dinner usually on Sunday. So, you know, we'd sit around. It was a very low-key day, and I started drinking. And I don't know if maybe I hadn't eaten much that day or I just drank more. I really don't know. But it was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I literally passed out on the couch. And there was a knock at the door, apparently. I didn't know. And my son, who didn't usually stop by like that, he happened to stop by. And I heard about this after the fact. He came over to me and he tried to wake me up, and I wasn't waking up, and he thought I was dead, and he ran into the kitchen yelling to his father, "I don't think she's breathing." And he came back and he said, "No, she's just drunk. She passed out." So I don't know what kind of a visit they had, but he left, and I guess I came to a couple hours later. Now, my son was, at this time, early to mid-20s, I guess. And my ex was disgusted with the whole situation, which I don't blame him. And he said, "Your son thought you were dead because you wouldn't wake up." And he said, "You got to start thinking about doing something about your drinking." And I knew he was right. Now, I know that's a horrible situation, and it's got to be one of my low points of being a mother, right? And I wasn't even acknowledging, at the time, I wasn't even acknowledging that I was an alcoholic. I wasn't, you know, and we tend to do that until we are ready to get help and ready to acknowledge that it's ruining our life, it's ruining our health, it's affecting our loved ones, it's affecting every aspect of your life. Until you are ready to do that, there's no reaching that person, you know, and I felt horrible, but it certainly didn't stop me from drinking. At least at that time, it did not. So that's a bad story, right? I know, very bad story. So there's that. And then there's me going after his father and his daughter left. His daughter didn't really live with us, but she was going to come and live with us because it was a whole big thing with her and her mom. But my ex decided no, that was not going to be a place where he was going to have his daughter live with a drunken woman. And him and his daughter, he chose his daughter, and rightfully so, they left. And they ended up moving to Georgia for a while. So I was alone, and my drinking went from bad to worse. And I kept going to rehabs and kept coming home, and I couldn't stay sober. I would stay sober for a week or two, but that was about it. And my son was very understanding. He got mad at me too, but he kept saying, you can do this, you got this. Well, finally I went into long-term treatment, and I was getting it. I was getting sober. I was staying sober for a significant amount of time. My son seemed very happy about it. He had a new girlfriend. This was the first love. Well, no, actually it wasn't. He had a first love when he was in his teens, I believe. And that was a lot of trouble that he got into. I think I touched on that on another video or two. But this was like an adult relationship, and he was in love. And she was a very nice girl, and he brought her on Christmas Eve to my recovery home. I was living with like 20 other women, and it was great. We went out to dinner, and she was just adorable, and I was so happy for him. And everything was great, and I'll always remember that Christmas Eve. It was, you know, I was so thankful that I had a chance to get sober, and I got some really good help, and I got some counseling, and I had camaraderie with other women that were going through the same thing of alcoholism and drug addiction. And things, my son was working, he was living, you know, in the Boston area, and he had met this girl who lived, or I should say woman, who lived in the Boston area, and everything just seemed to be going right. And I kind of sat back and said, phew, you know, I have a chance to rebuild my life, and I didn't lose my son. And that's what I thought. And I was right for a while. I was right for a while. Until years later when he met this other woman. But anyway, he got very protective of me, for sure. Very protective. He didn't think I could get the train and from Western Mass to Eastern Mass. And he didn't think I could do that by myself. And I kept saying, I can do that. I can do that. But he was like, no, you'll get lost. Now, I am horrible with directions. I am. I've always been like that. I can get lost in a paper bag. But, so what happened was I started taking the Peter Pan bus from Western Mass to Eastern Mass. and he'd pick me up at the bus terminal in downtown Boston. Well, they have a train. It's a purple train. My granddaughter used to call it, she's going to take the purple train. And it's really kind of cool. It goes to all the outskirts towns of Boston. It runs very frequently, I think even on the weekends. But Monday through Friday, a lot of commuters take it. And it's a very nice ride, actually. So I kept saying, I can do that. No, you can't do that. You'll get lost, blah, blah, blah. So if you, what am I trying to say? Fast forward like 5 years. He already knew the other woman, right? The woman that did not like me, didn't want any part of me. And I have my new granddaughter. And she's my firstborn granddaughter. And she was about 8 months old. So his attitude, and I understand when you have a child, when you start having your children, your focus has to be to your kids. So I don't want anyone to think that I didn't think that that was right. Of course it was right. But he got nasty. You know, the nastiness I don't think is right. You can say, yeah, Mom, take that train, you know, and I'll meet you there. And I'll pick you up, because the train station was near his house. So he didn't have to drive all the way into Boston. Great. I kept telling him I could do it. So the first time I did it, he calls me on the phone. I'm just ready to get off at the station, which is the station he told me to get off of. Oh, you're going to get off there? And I'm like, well, didn't you tell me to? And he's like, oh, yeah, but there's another station. I was wrong. And, oh, I'm going to have to drive 10 minutes farther. And he said it real disgustingly. And I said, I'm sorry. Just, it came out, you know, I'm sorry. I'm making him drive 10 minutes farther from his house. So that's kind of, it was such a switch over, if you will. From, oh, you can't do this, I need to protect you, you know, from getting lost, to, oh, now I have to drive 10 minutes farther. And I understand, he's a father now. But it was little things like that, you know, that made me realize, you know, just little things that I look back on now. I didn't notice at the time, or think at the time, that this was part of an estrangement situation, but it certainly was, you know. So, okay, fast forward another maybe 2 years, okay, 3 years maybe. I'm living in the same area he is, okay, about 30 minutes away. But COVID, of course, was going on. I hadn't seen him. I hadn't seen anybody in his family, including him, or my grandchild. There was another grandchild now, for a couple of years. I mean, he was at a point where I think he just didn't want to see me anymore. And I felt it. He was using COVID. I mean, people were going out. I mean, it didn't last that long, even in Massachusetts, even in a blue state. All that being shut up and not going out, even the masks, people weren't even wearing masks anymore in my area. So just to let you know that, you know, it wasn't all about COVID, but I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and it was Christmas Eve, and I don't know if I called him or he called me, but I was so happy to talk to him. So earlier that day, I had told him about, you know, when I was on the phone with him, I had told him about this experience that I had had earlier that day, which again was Christmas Eve. I had taken a walk, didn't have a car, and we had snow on the ground. And I wore good boots. So I'm traveling and I'm walking, and I misstepped off this. You know, you couldn't see where the parking lot ended or where the grass started, and I was going to the store, and I ended up falling into a snowbank. And I mean, I fell into a snowbank. I was up to practically past my hips, almost to my waist, in a snowbank. And the snow was partly frozen, and I had fallen into it. And I was near the parking lot because I could see the cars parked in this strip mall, which is where I was going. And there's a young guy that got out of his car, and he's talking on the phone. And it seemed like he's looking right at me. And I'm going, help, help, because I am literally stuck in snow. And he literally turned away from me, kept talking on the phone, turned back, looked at me, got off the phone, got back in his car and drove away. And I am like laying there, like, oh my goodness. How could somebody do that? How could somebody do that? So I was practically in tears. Now, the weather too, it was getting dark. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, which is kind of dusk at Christmas time for New England. It had been a cloudy day. And I thought, I got to get out of here by now. I've been in there like 10, 15 minutes. Nobody's going by. Nobody else is parking there that I can flag down. And I'm looking up at the sky like, oh my God, I got to get out of this snowbank. So I start with my legs and I start pushing and pushing and pushing and digging into the snow. Luckily, I had gloves. And I got like a big enough area around my foot that I could pull one foot out. And I worked on the other one. And I got the other foot out. And I got up and I was like, oh my God. Of course, I got my Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which is where I had gone. Had to have a Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Hey, it's Christmas Eve. Got to live a little, right? So I got my coffee, got my little bag, which probably had a donut in it. And I, tried to grab as much pride as I had left and walk home. So when I got home and I got all warm and toasty and everything was fine, and I think he did call me. And so I'm telling him the story, and he didn't skip a beat. He said, well, what do you expect? He was, some guy isn't going to stop for a crazy woman to help her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Why? He goes, well, I wouldn't help a woman out of the snow. And I thought, what kind of person would not help somebody that was stuck in the snow? I just don't understand that. I don't understand that. So I didn't know what to think about that. I was happy for the phone call. At least I got to talk to my son that day. It was Christmas Eve. Like I said, I hadn't seen him in person for a couple of years. So I got off the phone and I just thought I would be ashamed to tell a friend that my son actually said that. To me, it wasn't right, but that's him. And soon afterwards, the phone call stopped. And like I said, to this day here, which is 2025, September 2025, I have not heard my son's voice in about, I've lost track, probably 4 to 5 years. I haven't heard his voice. I don't call anymore because he won't answer. And the texts, we know how the texts have gone. So no. So, I'm in pretty much full estrangement, except for that he wanted me, and I truly believe this, he just felt like he wanted something from me, which was the blanket that he wanted me to make for his daughter. And I don't believe that I'm going to say this right now, I don't believe that it was an olive branch. A lot of you made comments and that, were very hopeful, and I wanted to believe that so bad. I don't believe that anymore. It was a means to an end for him. I don't think he would even tell her that it was me that made it, because, then she's going to say, well, where is she? Well, why don't we see her? Where is her? This was a whole nother thing too. And again, I know I'm going to get comments that I'm, telling you my side. I can only tell you my side. I can't tell you his side because I'm not him. It's not, I got a few comments that people were saying that I was being so narcissistic that I'm telling you my version. I can't tell you his version. Maybe he has a whole nother version of it. I don't know. Or conveniently, I think he would say, oh, I don't remember that. Convenient. I don't remember that. But I remember it. And I know what happened. And I know what was said and how it was said because it's ingrained in my brain. You know, when your kid says something that sounds harsh, you kind of remember that, you know. You remember the good and you remember the bad. But anyway, so I know my irresponsibility has maybe made my son a little more ambitious. That can't be a bad thing, right? I know he wanted to provide for his family better than I had provided for him. And again, we lived in a small town most of his growing up years. And we lived in one of the few, very few, apartment complexes. They were townhomes, but they had other regular apartments too, but very few. Most of it was old houses that were single family homes, lakeside homes. But there was a whole nother area of this town that they called them McMansions. That's what everyone called them. They were very large homes, but they all looked pretty identical to each other. And they were going up like crazy. And my son had friends who actually lived in some of these homes. And they were big and spacious and beautiful, you know. And I think there was some status issues going on. My son's friend's mother, who also lived in our apartment complex, made a remark one day that we weren't considered as good because we were apartment people. And I said, what? Apartment people? I grew up in a city. There was no such thing as apartment people and house people. But she said, yeah, we're apartment people and we don't rate very well. And I often wonder over the years, I mean, to me, I wasn't going to deal with any of that. I thought it was nonsense. But I wonder if my son maybe felt it, you know, maybe he did. You know, you move to a place like that, wanting to give your children a better life, better schooling, less crime, and you end up creating a situation that they feel less than, maybe. And my son, you know, he was very proud of himself. I was very proud of him too when he bought his first home, and it's a beautiful home. I do think the houses they were looking at were smaller than the one they actually ended up getting. And, you know, I wonder to this day if it's hard for them, if they are together, which I have no clue whether they are or not, if that is an issue of, you know, being able to pay their bills. But that is none of my business, and I know that, and it doesn't keep me up at night because they're adults and they'll figure it out. And I have enough problem, you know, paying my bills with inflation the way it is. But so there's that. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I'm sure there's other things that have happened through the past, or maybe things that I have done or not done that have affected my son. But he would have to tell that part of it, because I think there's things that I'm not aware of. And he's not here to speak for himself. I wish he were. I really wish he were. Nothing would make me happier than to have him sitting next to me, telling me and telling you about my shortcomings. It would hurt, but I think I'd be so happy to have him sitting next to me. I wouldn't care, you know. But I'm a dreamer in some ways, right? Because I can't see that ever happening. So I guess that's all I have for you today. I hope you're all doing well. I hope the weather is getting crisp and fall-like, and you're enjoying it wherever you're living. And please leave a comment below. Please like and subscribe. It helps our family, I'll call us a family, grow. And I love you all. And please do something nice for yourself today because you deserve it. And I'll see you in my next one. God bless.